Anderson, we should say about you to your face and on TV what we say about you behind your back, which is that you are a bright spot and a superstar, not a rising star, but already a star in the Democratic Party. Tell us what worked.
Well, thank you for that, but I have to give a lot of credit to everybody on the ground in North Carolina, and especially our candidates this year. We had phenomenal people that stepped up to run for office, and we truly believe that this is the success that North Carolina Democrats had was from the phenomenal folks that you saw on the ballot. People like Mo Green, who ran for superintendent of schools against Michelle Morrow, people like Rachel Hunt, who ran against Hal Weatherman, and just extreme Republicans that we had up and down the ballot in North Carolina. And to your point, we also saw it in our state legislature from people like Dante Pittman, Beth Helfrich, and Brian Kahn, who won in our state legislative races to break the Republican supermajority in the state house this year, giving Josh Stein that governor veto power that we need to see next year.
Anderson, the state became a hotbed for what has become normal in the Trump era, disinformation in an hour of crisis, life or death for the people of North Carolina after the hurricane. I wonder what you learned, what worked in terms of getting the facts and the truth in front of the people who live there and were impacted.
Really the face-to-face conversations that we were able to have on the ground. A lot of credit goes out to Representative Lindsey Prather. She was also one of the successes that we had on election night that helped break the Republican supermajority in the state house. But after Hurricane Helene hit in Buncombe County alone, her and her campaign team, led by Brendan Hipps, her campaign manager, a young Democrat in North Carolina right now, who helped a really aggressive campaign about making sure they were doing constituency outreach, mutual aid in her network. And that's what Democrats are going to have to continue going into 2025. We know that good constituency services improving to North Carolinians and people across our state that have been sowed this untruth from Republicans about government that is not actually helpful to them and that government isn't working for them. When people actually see that government can help them, they are empowered to vote for people that do that in office. And that's what we saw across North Carolina this year, particularly in Western North Carolina, too.
If people are willing and you're able to talk to the, I guess it would be 14 to 70% of people in your state who voted for Democrat for governor and a Republican Donald Trump for president, what would you want to understand about that specific split ticket vote?
I mean, honestly, it's not a trend that is uncommon in North Carolina. I think that historically our state has always managed to go for the federal level for a Republican candidate and at the statewide level a Democratic candidate, at least at the executive level. But I think it also says that we have to recruit candidates that represent the values of people throughout our districts. And, you know, I don't necessarily have the questions for them, but more so I have the aggressive approach to go after voters everywhere across North Carolina, even more in 2025, because to your point, disinformation hurt us. And what we saw at the national level was an aggressive disinformation campaign against Vice President Kamala Harris. And, you know, you don't have that same effect at the statewide level and at the local level for these races just yet, but they're growing. And what our party has to be able to get on the defense about going forward is making sure that we have established Democratic county parties in every community that are actively out there telling the truth about what Democrats are doing in positions of power and maintaining that aggressive grassroots approach to this party and how we campaign in communities again.
I mean, David Jolly, in the spirit of the humility that Matt Dowd talked about, I wonder what and Anderson, so humble, she was not going to brag on what she was able to do there, but Donald Trump did go to North Carolina, I think 4 times in the last 2 days of the election. I mean, it was something that he campaigned more aggressively to hold on to than 4 or 8 years ago. And I wonder what can be learned about what works and what chips away at Trump's hold on some of these states.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. North Carolina is such a fascinating hotbed here because of Democratic success. So Donald Trump rushes to Georgia and North Carolina at the end because he's afraid he's going to lose them. And just for viewers, I know Anderson referred to this, but, you know, in 16 and 20 and 24, Donald Trump wins North Carolina by 4 points, then 1, and then roughly 4 points this cycle. But the state elects Democrat Roy Cooper in 16, Democrat Roy Cooper in 20, and now Stein in 24. And you can't just chalk that up to Mark Robinson being a terrible candidate.
Right.
Because
he wasn't on the ballot either.
That's right. Right. So how do they do this? And I think it also wrestles with this theory. And this is where the North Carolina Democratic Party is so remarkable. You know, there's a growing theory, I subscribe to it, that all politics is national. That if you're running for county commission, city mayor, state governor, whatever, it's no longer informed by local issues. It's informed by the RD brand, the RD split. But North Carolina is this one state where you see voters standing up and saying, look, for people who are going to make decisions closest to home, I want Democrats. I want Democrats to make those decisions. And sure, it's a testament to organizing, but it's a testament to candidates. But it's also a model that could be studied countrywide in the next election cycle.